So I was very fortunate recently to be able to have some time with the wonderful CEO of Fundraising Institute Australia and to be able to bring Katherine's perspective and voice into this launch session today for our Income Summit. Katherine, for having this pre-record session with me. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm delighted to be here and to be part of it. Thanks for asking me.
Oh, always a pleasure. We've done lots of great things together, and here's another one. Well, Katherine, for those that might not have met you before or who might not have a lot of knowledge about the Institute, do you want to introduce yourself and FIA?
Sure. So I'm Katherine Raskob. I'm the Chief Executive of Fundraising Institute Australia, or FIA for short. FIA is the national peak body for professional fundraising, and our members include charities of all sizes and from all across the country. And we're really about promoting and protecting the charitable fundraising sector in Australia and advancing professional fundraising in Australia.
Beautiful. Excellent. Well, I'm really keen to hear all about the things that you've been seeing, but also what you're seeing into the future so we can get some really practical advice out to those that are joining us for the Income Summit. I want to touch briefly on, I guess, what's been happening over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, and what are you seeing as some of the biggest impacts on charity income over the last 12 months?
Well, I would definitely say, speaking from a charitable fundraising perspective, we're still continuing to see that cost of living impacts really making a difference to donors and their ability to give. And we do know that Australians are very generous, but when they're feeling in themselves that they don't have the resources, and this is particularly true amongst donors of lower socioeconomic backgrounds, that the challenges that they're facing in their day-to-day life mean an impact on their ability to give. And so in recent research that we've done with our partner, More Strategic, we have seen increasing number of people stating that they would likely have to give a little bit less in their regular giving and also potentially give to fewer charities. You might know that donors like to give to more than one charity. Often it's an average of 3 to 5. And we're seeing them saying that they will likely have to give to fewer. So I think, we're not out of the woods yet. Potentially we'll see some lessening of that impact this year, but we're still seeing the cost of living having a huge impact on donors' ability to give, even if their desire remains strong.
Sure, got you. Yeah, we're seeing that absolutely across the board. And then looking sort of more further afield, what are you seeing as some of those more macro sort of level, threats on our Australian charity sector?
Yeah, I think, the last 6 months has been filled certainly with a lot of nervousness and anxiety and uncertainty. We were facing some significant cost of living issues with higher interest rates. Most of us, paying more for, day-to-day essentials on the world stage, definitely uncertainty in other countries that are impacting us. And then finally, the lead up to a federal election, which I think has really made people a bit cautious and potentially nervous about the future. And so that has had an impact, and hopefully we'll start to see that settle down a little bit, and Australians can go back to their ability and their keen interest in supporting charitable causes that are near and dear to their heart.
Mm, great. Okay, interesting. And looking at, I mean, you're working with hundreds of charities all the time, you and your amazing team. What are you seeing in terms of some of the improvements and the tweaks that charities are making to be able to, sustain or increase their income?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is going to be critical in the coming year or two is definitely a focus on supporter experience. That idea of, supporter and donor journeys. And this is really critical because we have seen trends over the last 5 years of a decrease in the number of donors who are actually giving. This is not an Australia only trend. We're seeing those same trends in other countries like the United States and the United Kingdom. Luckily, the donors that are giving a bit more. And so our income has stayed relatively stable and it hasn't decreased dramatically. But it does mean that the number of donors, are declining. And so you really need to hang on to the ones that you've got. And so at every stage of a supporter journey, really thinking about how you can keep those donors closer to you, stickier, more engaged, more excited about the impact that they can make with their donation. And it's going to be really, really critical. And making investments in the resources that are required to keep those relationships strong and healthy, and potentially eking out a little bit more from each of those incredibly generous donors, I think will be really important. Number two is even though younger people are not in a financial position to donate as their parents or grandparents have been at the moment, what we're seeing from our research and from various research around the country is that younger people are very interested in charitable giving. They're interested in actually making an impact and making a difference, and they're quite aligned to causes. And so it's really important that we make investments now in capturing their imagination and attention around what impact that they can make. And that might be in volunteering or in signing petitions or being an ambassador for your charitable cause. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to donate, but holding them close now, keeping them engaged now, will set your charitable organization up for the future when they do have the capacity to give. So not ignoring younger people, even if you don't see a huge return at the moment, I think there will be some in the future.
Great, great to hear. Great to hear that that's on the horizon. And I want to touch on a point that I've heard you speak about a number of times, and that is the intergenerational wealth transfer as an opportunity that many charities are starting to understand and tap into. What are you seeing in terms of this as an opportunity for our sector?
First of all, those charitable organizations that have made investments in gifts and wills fundraising functions in the past are going to be able to take advantage of that in a greater way. And if they haven't made those investments, now is definitely the time. The tricky thing here is that there is no doubt we're going to be seeing that intergenerational transfer of wealth. 3.5 trillion is a lot of money. But I think, we can talk about that, but what we have to really be prepared for is how we're in the conversations so that when somebody receives inheritance or they receive, extra funds from their parents or grandparents that they weren't expecting, that we're actually in their sphere so that they think about us and about the opportunity to give and to make an impact. So no doubt the money will be there, but how are charitable organizations preparing and communicating and using all of their promotional sort of opportunities and channels to be there when somebody is ready to go, yeah, I want to use these funds in a positive and impactful way. And back to the younger donors, they have stated in research that they're willing, if they were to get an inheritance tomorrow, more than 20%, so they would be willing to give some of that to a charitable organization that they're aligned to. So we just need to make sure that we're continuing to invest in gifts and wills fundraising, that we're using all of our promotional channels to be in those places where younger and older donors are, and that we're ready and able to take advantage of this incredible transfer of wealth.
Oh, fantastic. Great advice. I'm loving the themes coming here about the next generation coming through too. It's
Yeah.
brilliant. All right, now I've got a tricky question for you because I know you're not allowed to pick favorites, but who are the organizations out there that you think, the ones to watch that, it's always great to be able to have some inspiration to bring into our organizations and follow along on other people's journeys. Anyone in particular that you think would be one to watch?
We're seeing fantastic work by many of our members. As I said, they're large charities, they're small charities, they're in many, many different subsectors of the charity space. But we did recently have a fantastic awards celebration and program at our conference in February in Sydney. And a winner that was really inspiring was Deadly Science. So they're a small organization providing technology, science technology, engineering and maths resources and education for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in Australia. And they actually won the award Impact on a Shoestring. And then they also won the penultimate award, which is overall winner. And to see an organization of that size be able to, win out over many larger charities who submitted for those awards was really, really heartwarming. And they did it for a really incredible piece of science education called KidsMaz. And I was so impressed with the work that they did. And obviously the judges were really impressed too. So more information on Deadly Science and their award and all of the award winners can be found on the FIA website.
Oh, great. We'll definitely be sharing those links and such an inspiring organization. Had the pleasure of meeting them a few months ago and quite inspiring across, I think, all aspects of how they're growing their organization. So thanks for picking that one and sharing that. So finally, we do need to wrap it up, but your final bits, your tips and insights and advice, what would be your sort of final three tips?
continue to invest in charitable fundraising. And I know that can be really difficult for CEOs and boards when they see some of their income contracting and potentially not having, channels in place to be able to, sort of help an organization to, succeed into the future. And sometimes organizations can look at fundraising as a cost, and it's absolutely not a cost. It's an investment. And in fact, the return on the fundraising investment is one of the best returns that a charitable organization can see amongst all of their channels. So that's where, if there are any temptations to pull back on fundraising investment, either in terms of investing in the channels or in the human resource to deliver incredible fundraising programs, I would say don't do it. It's a short-term, tiny little bit of a short-term sort of sugar hit for a long-term decline in their ability to sort of keep fundraising income generating into the future. So that's one piece of advice I would give. The second is to think about the ways that people are giving now and responding to those. It can be easy to just go, we've got older donors and we know them and they give to us and we'll just keep going back to them. But as we've discussed here, there are other generations of donors who are ready and willing to engage, either to give now or into the future. And also the ways that they're giving are different. So we've seen quite a shift over 5 years where previously Australian donors, in their incredible generosity, were much more inclined to regular giving. And we saw that 60% of charitable giving was usually done by regular giving sort of mechanisms, and about 40% by emergency appeals and sort of responding to when there was a disaster or an emergency. 5 years on, we're seeing that completely flipped. So now more Australians are giving in response to an emergency or an appeal that really speaks to their wishes and desires to make an impact. And so it may be that in the coming year, we can focus a bit more on smaller, more targeted, more local appeals that are really going to get the attention of a donor and align with their interest in making an impact more immediately. So that's another thing to think about, is different donors, different ways they want to give, and then adjusting charitable fundraising to the ways that they want to give. So those are two areas that I can think of would be really important to focus on, in addition to the continued investment in fundraising, to capture that intergenerational transfer of wealth and to continue that, to ensure that you've got strong charitable fundraising income into the future.
Well, brilliant whirlwind tour of fundraising best tips and advice and what you're seeing. I'm so grateful for you sharing your time with us. I know this is going to help so many people out there, just being able to tap into your wisdom. Thank you for your time, Katherine, and all the very best always to you and your team.
My pleasure to you too, and thanks for your partnership.